Warning, viewer. Major spoilers for the book Jekyll and Heidi by R.L. Stine. Beware, viewer. You're in for a scare. And crying a lot. Sometimes a piece of media comes around that leaves you speechless, ticks all the boxes, and reminds you why you love art so much in the first place. Spider-Man 3 was the first instance of this. It struck a chord with me that no other film did as a young lad, and it shines even brighter as an adult. Junior Senior's Don't Stop the Beat, an album that has everything I could possibly want. Its sound play and genre melding is unmatched, and these are all pieces of media that transport me to another world entirely. They mean the world to me, and I couldn't imagine my life without them. So you can imagine how thrilled I was when a book came along that completely captivated me and tore my whole world inside out. And that's the 1999 book Jekyll and Heidi. It is effectively a melodrama, an old-fashioned horror story, a tale lost in time, a story of shared trauma, a creature story, a collective dream shared in a microcosm. It's a book that means a lot of things to me. It's one of the most compassionate, harrowing, and frankly, Chantiricore things to ever be created on this earth. In terms of Goosebumps books, this is the holy grail. It essentially ticks all the boxes, and I'm surprised I didn't write it myself. But where to start? I think the first 2 pages ought to do the trick. I stared at the bus ticket in my hand and read my name over and over. Heidi Davidson, Heidi Davidson, Heidi Davidson. I gazed at it until the words blurred in front of my eyes. That's how I feel, I thought sadly. I feel like a blur. My life was all bright colors, but now my future is a grey, mysterious blur. I know, that sounds like something I read in a book, but that's the way I think sometimes. I write poetry, long, sad poems, and I write in my journal every day. Sometimes I wish I didn't have so much to write about. I still can't talk about what happened without tears burning from my eyes. Growing up in Springfield, my first 12 years were normal and happy. I have wonderful memories. I don't want to lose them. I hope my journal will help me remember them forever. Then, last month, the first part of my life came to an end. I might as well just say it. My parents, they were killed in a horrible car accident. You can't imagine the shock of it. The days of crying, the questions that repeated and repeated in my mind. Why? Why did it happen? Sometimes I feel too overwhelmed by sadness to get out of bed, and sometimes I find myself feeling angry at my parents for leaving me alone. Where will I live now, I wondered. Who will I be? Will I still be me? This has got to be one of the most devastating starts to a book ever. It throws you instantly into the cold depths of tragedy, of loss, of constantly feeling emotion on a high scale. Not only is the loss of any parent a tremendously difficult experience for anyone, but for Heidi Davidson, a 12-year-old, it must be absolutely traumatizing. Being so young, how could she comprehend or process this? How could she come to terms with this? No one should have to bear the weight. No one should have to endure the hardship. Yet there's something that differentiates Heidi from other people, and that is a sensitive soul. She writes poetry that comes from the depths of her sadness. As we read the book, it becomes apparent that Heidi processes information through an expressive artistic lens. She takes a situation and frames it as a black and white movie. She has a habit of romanticizing everyday life. There's a beauty and creativity to this, but it's something that makes her more vulnerable. Life is like a sad poem to her, and Stine takes this ideology and applies it to the whole book. Just to make things absolutely clear, this book is soaked in tragedy. It completely drains you of all feeling in the best way possible. All the characters face some agony. They all share trauma, yet all of them come from different circumstances and backgrounds. So, let's back up a little bit. Heidi essentially has nowhere to go, so she has to move in with her Uncle Jekyll and his daughter Mariana, who she hasn't seen since she was 5 years old. Jekyll is infamous for being quite reclusive, always working in his lab, being quite distant and neglectful of Mariana especially. This results in her feeling quite dejected and depressed, but we'll touch on that more later. Is Jekyll doing his experiments for a just cause? Heidi starts to suspect that he's doing experiments on himself, turning him into a monster. But considering all this, Jekyll seems like a nice dude. He welcomes Heidi with open arms. He reassures her over her parents' death, very open. Sure, he's in his own world, but he tries to keep everything together. Let's face it, the dude's a living contradiction. He's present yet detached. He can't seem to keep up with his daughter, let alone Heidi. And this is exactly where the classic story Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde comes into play. It implements all the dualities of the original work, but it puts a few subversions in there. Its focus and thematic aims are recontextualized in a shared angst story spread over 3 characters, perhaps with a more feminine focus and perspective. It's a more modern interpretation of the story mixed with classic stories from days of old. Its status as a melodrama has more in common with Fire Walk With Me and Spider-Man 3 in terms of its emotional language being heavily integrated into the narrative. Its theming concerning empathy and bravery in the face of tragedy, cyclical and generational trauma in a shared fashion dictate how the characters act. Larger-than-life feelings consume the soul of the book. There's one player I haven't even touched on yet, and that's Mariana. This character is the clearest representation of all the book's textual aims. She is the underdog of the story and the shining jewel. The story might start from Heidi's POV, but as we go along we realize that it is just as much Mariana's story as it is Heidi's. Mariana is a sardonic, reclusive, and bitter person when we get introduced to her. She doesn't seem very welcoming and understanding of Heidi. As the book progresses, we see Mariana hold resentment towards Jekyll for being neglectful and incessantly talking about his project, not a thought towards what she's going through or how she feels in the present moment. There's a part of the book where Heidi overhears Jekyll and Mariana fighting over something she's not privy to. We learn that Mariana is feeling helpless and isolated, and by the time the ending comes around, her plight seems even more tragic. This comes to a head in the infamous scene where Mariana, in a quick burst of rage, kills her own hamster. And this is frankly a disturbing, uncomfortable scene hinting at the darkness within. It does not hold back whatsoever and is only made more affecting on reread. Now, I am going to come clean with you. There's a big aspect of Mariana's character that I have left out because it gets revealed towards the end of the book. This reveal is so tied to Heidi and Jekyll's characters, so a bit of background. We have been led to believe this entire time that Uncle Jekyll is the one transforming himself into a beast, wreaking havoc on the village and townspeople. Not only has this been harming the town, but Heidi's mental state. She's been trying to get away from the hurt of her past. Little things in the house remind her of her parents' death. So to add insult to injury, hearing hundreds of people throughout the night screaming would set anyone further into despair. She tries to run away, but she only sees more hurt in the town itself, coming head to head with other people suffering. She is pushed back to the house. Then we see Heidi's transition to trying to understand the situation. She finds the supposed diary of the original Jekyll, but I'll come back to that later. She starts to assume control. If other people can't make her self-assured, it's got to come from within. This enables a sea change in the book where everything builds to a rising tension. The emotional peak is being set in motion. The book crashes into a sea of chaos. Heidi gets locked in a room for sneaking into Jekyll's lab. She was trying to find a deadly concoction that caused her uncle's transformation, but she manages to sneak out of the room that Uncle Jekyll locked her in, and what she sees on the outside is far worse. The beast is in full attack mode. With the help of Aaron, a person she got friendly with early in the book, he helps her away from the beast, but follows her, inches closer and closer to the mansion. Now, here comes the most devastating part of the book. I can't do it any justice here, so here is an excerpt ripped straight from the book. The beast struggled to free itself, thrashing its furry arms, bending its knees, heaving its shoulders, but Uncle Jekyll held on tight, hugging the angry creature, hugging it, until the beast surrendered, stopped its struggles. With a long sigh, the creature lowered its head and shut its eyes. Its shoulders slumped, its whole body sagged, and still Uncle Jekyll held on, hugging it so tightly. I wondered if it could breathe. And as my uncle hugged it, pressing his head against the furry back, the creature began to change, to shrink. The fur pulled back into the skin, the light faded from the blazing red eyes, the frothing snout melted into the face. As I stared in silent shock, the beast shrunk, hunched in on itself. When it raised its head, it had turned back into Mariana. Her black curls fell wetly, Covering her face, her shoulders heaved up and down. She pressed her face against her father's chest and cried softly. Uncle Jekyll held her tightly and raised his sad, red-rimmed eyes to me. "Heidi, I locked you in your room to keep you safe," he said, his voice just above a whisper. "I warned you to stay there. I didn't want you to get involved." I tried to help," I stammered, still staring in shock at Mariana. Mariana the Beast. "Uncle Jekyll, I didn't know." The words caught in my throat. Mariana raised her head. Tears rolled down her swollen cheeks. "Daddy," she whispered, "what am I going to do?" Uncle Jekyll patted her head gently. "I don't know, Mariana," he replied. "I spend all my time trying to find a cure for you. You know, I'm here in the lab, working on it night and day." A sob escaped Mariana's throat. "I can't go on like this, Dad, being a person in the daytime and a creature at night." I know, Uncle Jekyll said softly. "Someday soon I will find the right cure. If I just keep trying. I drink it myself. I test each one on myself to see what it does. You know what? I'll do anything to find the right mixture to keep you from transforming." I swallowed hard. "Uncle Jekyll, how did this happen?" I asked quietly. "Why does this happen to Mariana?" He uttered a sigh. "It happened 5 years ago. Mariana was 7. We were traveling in Europe. Our car broke down in the middle of a forest." He sighed again. "I remember it so clearly," he said, still hugging Mariana. "She got bored while the car was being fixed. She wandered into the forest and got lost. When I finally found her..." He swallowed a sob. "When I finally found Mariana, she told me about a forest creature. It attacked her, it bit her. I didn't know whether to believe her or not. She was always making up stories." He gently patted Mariana's hair. One bite of a creature was all it took to ruin Mariana's life. A few weeks later, Mariana transformed for the first time, and now, most nights, she transforms into a frightening, angry beast. I've been searching for a cure ever since. I think I'm close, but..." He stopped. Mariana raised her head, suddenly alert. All 3 of us heard the angry shouts, the thud of the boots on the hill. "No!" Uncle Jekyll let out a scream as a rock came crashing through the lab window, and then we heard the steady chant from the villagers outside. "Kill the beast! Kill the beast! Kill the beast!" I can't find the words to articulate how this makes me feel. All of Mariana's actions up to this point are recontextualized and given so much more insight. The arguments, the hamster scene are given new life. The beast side of Mariana were peeking into her normal life, and it was crushing every bit of her spirit. The way this scene is framed is so vulnerable. The whole book comes back to a broken father and daughter relationship, with the father doing everything in his power to rehabilitate his daughter, no matter the cost. Heidi realizes other people's sadness run deeper than she could ever know. She finds some clarity and solace within the tragedy. This book makes an effort to reframe the Jekyll story as a more feminist one. It tackles the ostracization women feel amongst their peers and how that drains them of all their life. The performative face they have to put on for everyone when they have so much hurt inside, conforming to an unreachable standard, and as a result they lose themselves. Not only is the book empathetic to everyone's struggles, but it knows when to acknowledge the reality of the situation. After this event, the townspeople come and raid the house. They destroy everything. At first, Heidi runs away with Mariana and Jekyll, but she realizes she left the diary of the original Jekyll in Mariana's room. She goes back to get it, and unfortunately, as a result of this, she never sees them again. At first, this might seem like a rash decision. Going back for an object, however priceless, in a situation like this, should be left behind. It's the people that really matter. Yet, when you think about Heidi's journey, it makes sense. All the books she's been wanting to get some relief from tragedy, to get away from what gives her pain, and as much as she loves her cousin and uncle, she must do what's right for her mental health. This is an example of subconscious thought driving conscious action. She might not have come to terms with her mental health or the way Jekyll and Mariana have dealt with her, but something deep down knows that she has to get away from it. Sometimes in life we don't always make the right decision, but it's the right one for the moment. As she goes out of the house, she finds Aaron, and this excerpt follows. "Pulling my wet hair off my forehead, I gazed around. The tunnel had led us past the village. to a row of low hills that faced the highway. The village stood quiet and empty behind the low hills. I turned, struggling to catch my breath. In the distance, high above the village, I could see a wall of orange and yellow flames, so bright against the purple night sky. The flames appeared to reach up to the moon. Uncle Jekyll's house, burning to the ground. The heat and smoke swept down the hill, washed over Aaron and me. My eyes welled with tears. The heat and smoke stung my face, but I didn't move. I stared up at the house, watching it burn, watching it vanish into the raging flames, until Aaron gently pulled me away. A wonderfully poetic moment. The fire represents the part of her life being burnt to ashes, finally being able to move away from the pain, even if it all comes crashing down. As much as this is a watershed moment for Heidi, the truth is it will take a lot more healing. The book ends with Heidi finding out that the diary was actually Mariana's. She was bit by her, and now she must deal with the curse herself. It's such a dour conclusion, but one that holds a lot of truth. How many times have we been through so many setbacks, only to be knocked down again? Not only does this tie to the whole cyclical concept of tragedy being sewn into your blood, but it's also an allegory for how trauma stays with you. It takes many years for it to be fully rectified. The curse Heidi has to deal with is the aftermath of the experience. Only through time and patience could she rid herself of her demons. Heidi can do it. Her tenacity and pursuance will get her through any situation. Happy endings don't always come to us, they have to be earned. Even if she has to travel to the ends of the earth, someday Heidi will find her cure. I just know it. I have a confession to make. Writing this was so hard for me because it's not only a book I care deeply about, but it's one that describes the way I feel things and speaks to what I've gone through. Mariana and Heidi feel like different parts of me at different times in my life. Reading this book is just so affirming to me. Doing this video was working through my own issues. It was like a hug for myself. I'm so happy that something like this exists. The passion, the melodrama, the pulp, the grace that drips off the page is just staggering. A work that I will always come back to in any mind frame. It does what any great work of art does, and that is give me strength to go on and push myself beyond my limits. If this video translated that at least one little bit, I know that it was all worth it.